Hello there, Steve here in Sydney of the lay gnosis website truebluehealer.com. Today I'm going to talk about a major pseudo-skeptic who goes on stage between James Randi and Richard Dawkins, and he's a glittering, sparkling personality and probably the most attractive personality they have on stage today. He seems to be sort of a replacement for the lost Carl Sagan. His name is Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I'll just show you a few images of him. I'm sure you've seen him on Discovery Channel presenting somewhere here or there. But he also turns up at skeptic meetings where he talks about the importance of being skeptical, you see. I'll show you the track of that, and you can listen to it and see what he says. I'm not misquoting him, but I'll give you a few images here so you know what's going as what we're talking about, okay? Neil deGrasse Tyson is billed as a qualified astrophysicist, which is, almost worthy of worship. What the hell is that? Must be a real scientist. And he's billed as this, and he's said to be working at the prestigious Smithsonian Institute, popularising science. So in that sense, he's very much like Richard Dawkins. Do you remember Richard Dawkins was never actually a professor of evolution or biology, but actually the title of his professorship chair is popularising science, the popular view of science. And that seems to be what Neil deGrasse Tyson is doing, and there's really nothing wrong with that. I love colourful scientific shows, don't we all? It's today's modern metaphor, isn't it? Neil deGrasse Tyson would seem to be worthy of nothing but praise. He's a beautiful, attractive man. He's a very good presenter with a flowing form of speech and a beautiful James Earl Jones, almost Darth Vader type voice. He's a low-level comedian. He makes little sort of weak jokes, and he gets high levels of laughter from the audience. He goes to skeptic meetings, and he just says a few keywords, and everyone roars with laughter. Sort of like whatever he says is funny. He's going to get an applause and positive response no matter what he says, you see. And there's a problem with that, because as an astrophysicist, all he really does is go on stage and repeat the one joke that Richard Dawkins knows, which is, and I'll be playing this for you, and he, at every one of these amazing Randi meetings where he turns up on stage, he reminds everybody that you can be so open-minded that your brains can just fall out. Now, as far as I know, that's the only joke that Richard Dawkins knows, and here we've got an astrophysicist repeating it. The funny part is the audience loves it. This weak, constantly reiterated 50-year-old joke or something brings roars of laughter from the audience. These are people who have paid to come and hear this meme spoken over and over again. They pay for it, they enjoy it, they want to hear it, coming from such a wonderful Discovery Channel presenter. And he's a good presenter. He has quite a sort of comedic body language, that sort of thing, and he's quite good indeed. So I give him 100% for presentation.
Should be in all of us is something called skepticism, because there's so many people out there who are not skeptical, who say, oh, you have to have an open mind, and then they believe anything that anybody tells them, and they're so gullible to believe things. In fact, their minds were so open their brains spilled out. That's the problem here, right? You have to sort of resist this.
It's a beautiful name too, hasn't he? It's almost hand-picked. I mean, it's sort of like a television chef or something, isn't it? I mean, what a lovely sounding name. Nothing like John Smith at all. So, he's got the right sort of name, the right presentation, and I really admire this man, the way he presents on television. He's certainly got command of the media and access to the media. He's been on Time magazine, and he's done live interviews where he had a poem ready. He's going to answer 10 questions or something about the universe. And one question was the most astounding thing about the universe. And he goes into a poetic sort of soliloquy. It's quite good, entertaining to watch. And people put various backgrounds behind it on YouTube. There's quite a few presentations of it. But in the middle of it, he says something. He's talking about the massive size of the universe, and he says in the middle of this presentation, and I'll mark it for you on the soundtrack when you hear it, that some people feel small when they are presented by the hugeness of the universe, words to that effect. Some people feel small. Okay? Now, I'm very glad he said that, because he basically hangs around with the pseudo-skeptic James Randi, Richard Dawkins community. And I've had that written to myself hundreds of times by skeptics. And the conclusion all the pseudo-skeptics come to is that the universe is so big, it renders me, myself, worthless. I've had that written to me by many, many pseudo-skeptics over the years. It's a wrong conclusion. It's a wrong conclusion. And I made a video about this very subject years ago. Carl Sagan had the same effect, going on and on and on about how insignificant we are because the universe is so big. That's the meaning that many pseudo-skeptics read into this vastness of the universe. They are literally assaulted, beaten into a heap, rendered virtually nothing. Their life is not worth living. And we find this is a common theme to all the pseudo-skeptics. So you get people like Louis Sava, the skeptic who wrote Everything is Pointless. That's the name of his blog. Nothing is worth doing. And I've had so many people say to me, look, you just don't understand how far it is to Jupiter. Once you understand how far it is to Jupiter, you realise nothing's worth doing and life is pointless. That's a protest about the harshness of reality, the way it's presented to pseudo-skeptics. Now, I think they are negatively predisposed to take that way too much to heart and render themselves dismissible by mentioning a few numbers and the size of the universe. It's a personality defect in each and every one of them, and collectively as a group it is played to by Neil deGrasse Tyson and James Randi and Richard Dawkins. DeGrasse Tyson says he personally is not made to feel small. He feels very big because he's part of the universe, plugged into it, and it's part of him and it's inside him. But the general pseudo-skeptic audience don't have that breadth of thought, that athleticism of mind to go that far. They just shrink because of their predisposition to, I am useless, I am hopeless, my life is pointless. This tendency toward depression and self-loathing, it's a very common theme in pseudo-skeptics. They're coming out of the JREF James Randi site. I've had this written to me many hundreds of times. So I'm very glad that Neil deGrasse Tyson has confirmed the fact, because he lives amongst all these pseudo-skeptic people. He bathes in it, rolls in it, revels in it. He lives amongst the pseudo-skeptics like James Randi, Dawkins, etc. And he copies their moves on stage. So he's not that original a presenter. And he plays a bit of a comedian act, throwing his hands up defensively, that sort of thing. Lots of humorous body language. But I can thank Neil deGrasse Tyson for confirming my suspicion from years ago, revealed to me by skeptics one-on-one, that astronomical distances and the size of space actually do damage to some people who are predisposed toward self-dislike, self-loathing, inferiority feelings. You can be rendered pointless, useless, and not worth living. It can add to your fears if you already have them. Okay? So there we've got from this astrophysicist from the prestigious Smithsonian Institute, confirmation that a lot of people are actually damaged by large numbers. They take it to heart. It has a biochemical effect on them, depressing them at least. you might think that all things positive are positive and things that are nice are always nice, but the truth is anything that involves millions of people, there's inevitably a casualty rate. So we have, if 1 million people cross the road, they won't all get there. There's going to be so many broken legs, so many heart attacks, so many asthma attacks, so many people falling down and not getting there because they're hit by automobiles or some other thing gets in the way. But whenever you have millions of people involved in something, there's always a casualty rate that you probably wouldn't expect at first sight. And I think the people who have discovered this to their greatest cost would have to be Big Pharma, who do small-scale tests and then drop a medicine on millions of people, and suddenly all kinds of strange side effects pop up which no one ever thought of. Can't blame anyone for that, it's just the cruel reality of life. But Neil deGrasse Tyson is talking about a whole bunch of people here that feel small. They're shrunk by large numbers. Large numbers have like a demonising effect on them. And for that reason, there's something else that's involved in all these skeptics' childhoods which has an effect on them. Namely, you'd think the myth of Santa Claus was completely harmless, wouldn't you? But even the myth of Santa Claus, which is invented to charm children, give them something a detective story to unravel, to get their minds working, even that has a casualty rate, just like people crossing the road. And the casualty rate of the Santa Claus myth has been, and it's still talked about today by pseudoskeptics. When you find out that you've been believing the Santa Claus myth 2 years longer than everybody else, and now you're 8 years old or something, if you're predisposed to self-dislike, inferiority feelings, perhaps self-loathing, it's possible to hate yourself with a vengeance because you believed in Santa Claus last of all, and someone finally had to tell you because you didn't cotton on. Now this has happened to most of, or many of, the pseudo-skeptics in the audience that Neil deGrasse Tyson speaking to, James Randi speaks to, Richard Dawkins speaks to. So are we going to ban the story of Santa Claus? Well, believe it or not, I've seen in Australian media suggestions that it should be banned, that it's a cruel lie fed to little children. So there have been moves to try and, because of its casualty rate, I've actually seen moves to try and abolish the Santa Claus myth and abolish Christmas. There's always people attacking us, isn't there? Always little pressure groups wanting to steer society their way. But we can't help it if people are predisposed towards self-dislike, self-loathing, feelings of inferiority. But that's what the pseudo-skeptics are, and I've got direct writings from them revealing this in some detail. A fellow called Emilio wrote to me years ago and explained it, having studied many other people's inputs. And this is the meaning of the keyword gullible that Neil deGrasse Tyson uses in that audio clip. He says some people are so open-minded that their brains fall out, which is repeating Dawkins' old meme, old joke from 50 years ago. And he then goes on to say, words to the effect, we can be too gullible, can't we? We don't all want to be gullible, do we? With great emphasis, you see. And the audience erupts in laughter. They've paid to hear this come from the glittering authority figure, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Because it's actually therapy, because once upon a time they loathed themselves for being so gullible, for believing something so credulously. They came to detest themselves, loathe themselves, dislike themselves, feel desperately inferior. And so he's building them up by saying we're not going to be too gullible, are we? We're going to be skeptics by never believing anything ever again. Okay, that's the track, the path chosen by these pseudo-skeptic people, who to me are a bunch of suffering people, something like Alcoholics Anonymous, dressing themselves up as a scientific support group or something, supporting the public diffusion of science, that sort of thing. All sounds so wonderful, doesn't it? But they all pay a lot of money to be there, and here we have gullible, vulnerable people having money taken out of their pockets. I'd also like to point out that the word gullible is quite an unusual word, not used in normal adult conversation. You rarely hear it amongst normal adults. Yet, under my videos, 300-400 videos on pseudoskeptics, it's one of the first words pseudoskeptics write, that everyone they meet is gullible. So they are projecting these feelings of gullibility that they once were onto everyone they meet. And Neil deGrasse Tyson plays it up to them to great laughter and applause, great audience reception. So I can only thank Neil deGrasse Tyson for confirming from his wonderful astrophysics understanding and his prestigious position at the Smithsonian Institute that many people are made to feel small, and just reading into that thing, a percentage of the people made to feel small by astronomical numbers become casualties, and they become pseudo-skeptics. Okay? It's not the big numbers that do them in. They already have a tendency toward this, and they've hated themselves as being gullible early in life. So Neil deGrasse Tyson or Carl Sagan comes along and goes, Andromeda galaxy 400 billion years and you shrink to nothing. It's like an assault on the pseudo-skeptic. They take it way too much to heart. Now someone else does this in a different way, and it's kind of depressing that it's so easy to do this to people. Richard Dawkins picks up a handful of dirt in one BBC documentary, and he says, basically words to the effect, this handful of dirt I'm holding renders your existence insignificant, pointless. You just don't have any understanding, unless you just don't understand, he says, how big the universe is and how many bacteria there are in this handful of dirt, and that renders you useless. I mean, if you just carry this one step further and just substitute a couple of terms, it doesn't sound anywhere near as dramatic. And it's because of the beautiful speaking voices, the Oxbridge speaking voice of Richard Dawkins, I think. I think voices have significant effects on the minds of people. Certainly Neil deGrasse Tyson's does. So we have, pick up a house brick and you say, oh, there's 500 million molecules in this house brick, which renders you pointless. It's 500 million miles to Jupiter, or it's just a long way to Tipperary, but still your life is rendered pointless, meaningless. It's really comparing yourself to a distance or a physical dimension. It's a real mistake of materialist thinking. It does them damage, does them harm. So now, why am I telling you about Neil deGrasse Tyson and what he actually does and who he actually works with, who he works between on stage, presenting to very much a sort of picked audience who have paid to be there? The reason is I've had a number of skeptics write to me that James Randi and Richard Dawkins have the endorsement of Neil deGrasse Tyson, the great astrophysicist television presenter on the Discovery Channel. So everything they say must be true. It's got to be true. Neil deGrasse Tyson tells us. And head-kicking everyone you meet on YouTube, that's endorsed by Neil deGrasse Tyson too. You should all be more skeptical, and us head-kicking everyone we meet is making them more skeptical. That's what I've had written to me by skeptics under my several hundred videos about pseudo-skeptics, which are all baits for them to display their disabilities. And one of them is this terrible weakness where numbers do them harm because they're the casualty rate, the unexpected casualty rate of large numbers. You wouldn't think numbers could do harm to anybody, but they certainly do to pseudo-skeptics if you're negatively predisposed toward feeling worthless about yourself. And so many people, millions of people born, there's going to be a percentage of them always there of that nature, susceptible to taking the wrong end of the stick from a glittering television presenter with respect to large numbers. So, can I just summarise now for you what Michael Shermer, Richard Dawkins, James Randi and Neil deGrasse Tyson are really doing by repeating the same therapeutic words to the audience the audience desperately needs to hear. It goes like this. Pseudoskeptics are damaged in childhood, sometimes damaged by numbers. The brain development isn't the same as everybody else's. There's an unexpected casualty rate. And they come upon the situation because they're predisposed to hating themselves, despising themselves, detesting themselves for being too gullible over something, some XYZ subject. It often seems to be Santa Claus. We don't really know, but there's plenty of confessions to that on YouTube. And the realization that they have been gullible is so profound and so damaging that they swear never to believe anything ever again. And the key word is gullible. It's a skeptic's word. They use it over and over again. And it's used to keyword the audience by these 4 speakers I've just been listing. And Neil deGrasse Tyson puts it in the sound clip, and I'll play it at the end here for you, just as a reminder before I define what they're actually doing. And Neil deGrasse Tyson says, we all have to avoid being gullible, don't we, to shouts of agreement and laughter from the audience. And the only way to do that, boys and girls, is to be skeptics, right? The audience laughs again. So what are they actually doing? So basically have a whole lot of brain damaged adults who are being egged on by their stage psychiatrists with the usual key phrases like don't be too open-minded or your brains fall out and we mustn't be gullible, must we? The medicine is, the therapy is, to be aggressively skeptical, to keep away those nasty thoughts of being gullible. You see, that's the therapy coming out of CSI, COP, all the amazing Randi meetings. It's really a therapy group for under-functioning, brain-damaged people. Okay? And the business about being gullible is a bit risky to do. It's okay to say for these people who are extreme cases of gullibility, but Neil deGrasse Tyson is wrong presenting the Big Bang, I regret to say. Science is never 100% correct, and Neil deGrasse Tyson is going to have to eat his words soon, most likely, because it's just been found out, and it's the next video coming, that there's strong evidence now the speed of light varies and it's never been a constant. That was a mathematical convenience used by Einstein, and it's false. And now, because they can now measure very, very accurately down to a period of time called an attosecond, whatever the hell that is, I think it's very small. Now, don't measure your character against that very small concept. But to measure the speed of light we need to use attoseconds, and Neil deGrasse Tyson is going to be shown, and I wonder how he's going to present this, that the speed of light's not a constant after all, and the Big Bang probably never happened, and the age of the universe is not known at all, because the redshift is a load of horse hockey, right? This is coming out of science periodicals this week. So, have we explained the pseudo-skeptic phenomenon to you and what they are? They're really just a talk therapy session, telling people what they need to hear to feel better about themselves. I can't blame them for that, but head-kicking everyone they meet on YouTube is, it's not therapeutic to anybody as far as I can tell. So I'll leave you with that, and I'll show you, I'll give you the gullible speech from Neil deGrasse Tyson with his wonderful speaking voice at the end here.
Called skepticism, because there's so many people out there who are not skeptical, who say, oh, you have to have an open mind, and then they believe anything that anybody tells them, and they're so gullible to believe things. In Their minds were so open, their brains still that was. That's the problem here.